is loneliness so universal and goes right through the ages? Quite simply, the Bible tells us this, because man, created in the image of God, is a social being. The Bible teaches us we're made to have relationships. First with God, which of course was destroyed by sin, but can be restored through the cross. Amen? But secondly, to have relationships one with another. And that's an important thing. Now, there's a big difference between being alone and being lonely, because you could be here tonight and feel very lonely, even though you're surrounded by people. But you could also feel not lonely out, I don't know, walking across a beach somewhere or on cliffs. So it's a difference between that. Loneliness is not permanent unless you want it to be, because I really believe that there is a solution, there's an antidote to loneliness that we're going to look at in a while. The fifth point I want to bring to you. Now, you may notice since I arrived here, if you just show the next slide, there's a quote that I've been saying over and over again. The importance of connecting people and building community. Why have I said that? Because I believe that is the key to begin to turn loneliness around. I believe it's the key to see people properly pastored and cared for in a small group environment through building community. I believe that when people come to church, they need to connect with others, because that's how God intended. I remember a lady telling me that she'd been to one of our larger London churches. I won't say who that is, but I imagine you can probably guess. It was a while back. She went for 2 years, and no one in those 2 years ever said hello to her or spoke to her. 2 years. Now that's incredibly sad, because if people who are lonely want to come into a place where they don't feel lonely anymore, it should be church. Amen? It should be church. Because that's what God intends the church to be, a place where people can come and feel part of a family. And that's why it's important that we connect people. You know that it's everyone's duty, if you want to call it that, responsibility or whatever, to connect people. When you see someone here for the first time, it's not up to the welcome team, really, to come and connect with them. It's up to us. If there's someone sitting in your row that you don't know, say hello. Say, who are you? Say who you are. Just try and connect with them. That's what we should be doing as Christians in building and sharing the love of Christ in community. Amen? I know it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to do. Some people are shy, like me. But you can overcome that because God is able to give you boldness. Amen? So prayerfully, as you come in on a Sunday, look around, and don't wait till you got a badge on you saying, welcome team. Just do it. Just say hello to people and connect with people. There are a lot of lonely people who walk into this church and just want to find fellowship and belonging. There's a novelist called Thomas Wolfe, and he writes an essay. And this is what he writes. The whole conviction of my life now rests upon the belief that loneliness, far from being a rare and curious phenomenon, particularly to myself and to a few other solitary men, is the central and inevitable fact of human existence. When we examine the moments, acts, and statements of all kinds of people, not only the grief and ecstasy of the greatest poets, but also the huge unhappiness of the average soul, we find, I think, that they are all suffering from the same thing. The final cause of their complaint is loneliness. This just underlines for me the fact that we stated quite clearly, the Bible tells us God created us for relationship, to relate to him and to relate to one another. So how do we deal with this loneliness? Come on, let's try and get to the bottom of this. I think you're probably seeing now the antidotes appearing on the slides. Togetherness. Well, First thing we have to do if we want to deal with loneliness is this. We have to understand that God is concerned about you and your loneliness and wants to help you. It's within his heart, his character, and his nature to express his love to you. And the best way that he can express his love to you is through his church. Amen? So he looks at his church to be a loving people because we, as his people, should reflect his nature and character. So we have to understand, first of all, that God is concerned. In fact, the psalmist in Psalm 68 says something quite important. He says, "A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing." Now that's interesting because God does set the lonely in families. And what is the greatest family? The family of God. Amen? That's you and that's me. We make up his church. We are his family. And he sets people in the family, those who are lonely. Now, I don't think it's any mistake that the psalmist also, in that same sentence, talking about setting the lonely in families, talks about leads the prisoners out with singing, because often when we are lonely, we feel that we're in a prison cell. We feel that somehow we're in a situation that we can't get out, and we need to break out of it. But the only way to break out of the loneliness is to find the antidote, which is togetherness. And God leads us into the families so that we can belong, we can be part of something, that we can be attached to, associated with, surrounded by others. And that's important to overcome loneliness. The second thing is that we need to recognize and understand that God is always with us. Always with us. So therefore, in theory, we should not be lonely. Yes, human connection is important, but firstly, God is connecting with us as we've come to him, committed our lives to him, and had that relationship restored through the cross of Jesus. Jesus says in Matthew 28:20, "Surely I am with you always." Not some of the time, not just on a Sunday, always. And in Deuteronomy 31 verse 8, "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." Great promise. Great truth. It's a fact. Psalm 16 verse 11. "You have made known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand." In God's presence. Well, we say that we come into God's presence, but actually the truth of the matter is we carry God's presence. Amen? If we are believers, where we go, God goes. So we don't ever leave his presence or come into his presence. We are always in his presence. And we need to remember that. We need to know that. We need to understand that. And as we understand that, that helps us in our times when we feel very alone. God is with us, always with us.